All right, continuing discussion of romance and sexuality in adolescence. This video is going to focus on same-sex relationships in adolescence. Now, there's an issue with studying this topic. There are huge differences, huge cultural, community, environmental differences in terms of whether someone can admit to having same-sex attraction at all. Other tricky things are when we talk about same-sex attraction, sometimes we leave out the difference between sexual identity and gender identity, or the difference between gender and sex. And we kind of leave out that you might have some individuals who are non-binary or transgender, and we will misinterpret whether the relationships count as same-sex relationships. And so there are definitional terminology issues, and there are cultural differences that have to be acknowledged. All right, so first of all, let's talk about some cultural differences. There are some cultures where not only are same-sex relations just frowned upon, but in some places they are criminal. And so, of course, if you are living in a time or a place where those type of relationships are criminal, you may not engage in them simply because, hey, you might want to, you might be interested, but you're scared and you don't want to face legal consequences. All right. Other places are more accepting, and if you just look within the United States, you will see tremendous differences from community to community, state to state. Within states, different areas have very different acceptance, tolerance, or acceptance of same-sex relationships. And there are many people who very strongly believe that adolescence is too early to discuss or perhaps allow same-sex attraction or relationships. Many people will voice the idea, and just people in the general public, not scientists generally, but people in the general public will voice the idea that, well, you can't possibly know if you're gay when you're young. All right, well, let's talk about things like coming out. All right, so we know the phrase coming out. When someone comes out, they essentially admit, sometimes to themselves, sometimes to the world, that they are gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual. You may not be familiar with the term pansexual. Pansexual is essentially when you are attracted to individuals for the person, not anything about their genitals. That's where you're like, look, I don't care if you're non-binary, trans, cisgender. I like you for you. I don't pay attention to the genital aspects of things. Other people will have strong preferences based on whether that is a male or female body. All right, and so when we look at coming out, we see that people do it at different ages for a lot of the reasons that I just brought up. There are factors like how accepting is your family. Is your family going to disown you and kick you out, which does happen if you come out? Well, are your friends going to disown you? Are you in a very real danger of a hate crime, of being harmed if you come out? Other issues are just knowledge about categories and definition. A lot of stereotypes and misinformation can feed into confusion about what it means to come out as a member of a particular group, labeling yourself with a particular category. I know when I was younger, I've heard from many people from my generation, Generation X individuals, those that I know that are in the LGBTQ plus community. They will talk about how stereotypes kept them from understanding who they really were. Like if you had someone who was male who was having attraction to other masculine presenting individuals, they in some cases didn't recognize they were gay because they were told that being gay meant that you acted feminine. Right? And I remember my own family very much believed in this stereotype. They would focus on things like if a man sat with his legs crossed, that meant he was gay. Not who does he date? Who does he love? But he sat with his legs crossed, so that means he's gay. I also know I've read and watched social media content from some transgender individuals of my generation who were very late in coming out. And they talked about things like they saw on TV, if there was a trans character, first of all, they were either the villain or the comic relief. And they also presented as if being a transgender woman always meant it overlapped with being a gay man and being attracted to men. And so transgender women who are attracted to women and feminine presenting individuals, a lot of them assume, well, I can't be trans because I'm missing this one thing that really isn't part of the definition, but they were led to believe that. So there are a lot of factors that go into perhaps a delay in coming out as LGBTQ+. And so what we see is the average age of coming out for 18 to 24-year-olds at the time of recording, based on recent research. In 18 to 24-year-olds, the average age of coming out is about 17. And it's been like that for a few years when I check on recent research. Now, for people in my parents' generation, your boomers and silent generation, it's older, all right? It's like in the 30s, much older, because in some cases they were worried about very serious consequences, like not being able to get a job, getting fired, getting hate crimes, legal issues, and then people in their 30s, it was like 21 or something like that. So you see, the age of coming out seems, at least based on some research, based on available research, going down. Possibly because of greater acceptance, possibly because of increased legal protections, even though in some areas those are getting taken away again. There were, for a while, increasing legal protections of members of the LGBTQ+ community. Now, so average age coming out is 17. Okay, well, that's the average age of coming out. Well, what's the average age of knowing that you had same-sex attraction? Well, for many individuals, they knew very early on in life, but you have an average age based on one study that I've read, that I'm familiar with. Based on one study, the average age of knowing, of having awareness of same-sex attraction or attraction that puts you into the queer category, being around age 11. All right. So there's a delay. There's this huge delay between awareness and admitting to the attractions on average. Okay. And then when I teach in person, I'll often leave it open and I'll say, so why? Why is there such a delay? Because anybody have any idea when just straight up heterosexual people, cisgender heterosexual folks, who have the type of attraction that cause them no conflict whatsoever because it's what society expects of them, when are they aware? When are they aware of their attractions? Well, it's around the time of puberty, age 11 on average, or possibly earlier because, they see it in movies and whatnot. But typically there's no gap between admitting to your heterosexual straight attractions and having awareness of them. It usually just kind of comes together like, all right, I'm recognizing I have these attractions that people told me I would have, and yeah, I do, cool. No conflict whatsoever. But, think about the individual who has the type of attraction that goes against what's been portrayed in movies and storybooks, and their parents describing their future as growing up and getting married to someone who's different than what you're actually attracted to. So there are a lot of reasons that you would delay admitting to yourself or to others that you have those attractions. So be aware of that. All right. There are individuals in adolescence who knew who they liked. Maybe they were in denial. Maybe they were trying to convince themselves otherwise so that they could be socially accepted, not kicked out of their house, not experience hate crimes, not experience a lifetime of prejudice, and constantly wondering if their rights are going to be taken away. Now, another issue is that many individuals in the LGBTQ+ community will report that part of their sort of denial or hiding or being closeted in adolescence involved pretending to like who society expected them to like. So doing things like a gay male dating girls, going to dances with girls, doing that sort of behavior. And some people will falsely believe that engaging in that sort of behavior, that can either get the person to become attracted to, these socially correct category, or that if they just find the right girl, that idea. Or that can mean that they're bisexual. And some people are. We don't want to participate in bi erasure. That's a huge issue for individuals who are bisexual, is in the LGBTQ plus community. They often feel like they are not discussed, not noticed, not given much attention. And a lot of people have the misperception that people who are bi are just temporarily bi. They're either going to realize this is just a phase, or they're going to choose a side and come out as gay or lesbian. And that's actually not true. One of the largest category in LGBT, in sexual minorities, is bi. All right, people are bi. But when someone who has same-sex attraction dates someone of the opposite sex, it's not because they're bi, and it doesn't turn them bi. It doesn't give them attractions that weren't already present. It's often because they are trying to fit in, or sometimes it's in denial. They want it to be true that they have these attractions that they don't have, because then it's socially acceptable and they don't have to worry. They don't have to have the conflict of being in a category that doesn't have it easy. All right, so some other issues. Parents. Parent and peer support is tremendously correlated, statistically significantly, and not in a small way. If you're familiar with the term statistically significant, sometimes you have statistically significant relationships, but practically they're not all that large. Practically, it's a pretty large relationship between having support from your parents, support and acceptance from parents and peers, and how you fare as an individual in the LGBTQ plus community. Even with high support, though, there are still struggles. I mean, just community at large, but also just, fitting in, dealing with discrimination, dealing with prejudice. Depression and anxiety are higher in LGBTQ individuals as a whole. They do have higher rates of depression and anxiety. Some people will say, well, that's because they're gay. If they just weren't gay, they wouldn't be depressed or anxious. That is not true. Research does not support that at all. Actually, we show that if people try to deny their sexuality, or if they do something like go to conversion therapy, which, by the way, the American Psychological Association has made statements against conversion therapy, not even effective for what it is purported to do, but also can cause harm. And a lot of individuals when people try to convince them that they are not really gay, lesbian, bi, trans, a lot of times it just makes them realize, no, actually I am. Even with all of this effort to change, I actually am. There's a lot of research. I'm summarizing a lot of research you could easily look up. Go to Google Scholar, because you have peer-reviewed resources that you can find through Google Scholar. If you use just regular Google, anybody's blog can show up, and you don't know if that's reputable. Scholar.google.com will get you peer-reviewed scholarly articles. And there are lots that address these issues. Having support. Having support seems to be tremendously beneficial. One issue with the LGBTQ plus community, especially when we look at adolescents, you do have not just depression and anxiety, but elevated risk for suicide, self-harm. And when there's support, those risks are lower. So support is tremendously important, tremendously beneficial. We don't have evidence that you can change someone, but we do have evidence that if you accept someone, if you support someone, they tell you who you are, and you say, oh, cool, I'm going to do all I can to make you happy. When parents and peers have that type of reaction, those risks go down considerably. All right, another issue with sexual orientation or sexual identity during adolescence. Adolescence is a time where you're figuring out your identity. That's also true for sexual identity. So we do see fluidity. fluidity in sexual orientation and sexual behavior during adolescence. You will see a lot of behaviors. We used to favor the term experimentation, and now we'll just say fluidity. You know, you are still trying to figure out who you are. You might engage in a same-sex relationship, same-sex flirtation, same-sex sexual behavior, and it may not end up being your identity, but you know, you're trying it out. You are figuring out who you are. So you do see a high degree of fluidity. Let's see. All right, yeah, we have, okay. That's what I want you to know for my class. Again, you know, focusing on research. If you want to know more, and I often have students who do have questions, who do want to know more, who want clarifications. If you were in my class, don't hesitate to email me with questions. And then also Google Scholar is a great resource for actually finding the articles and learning more about what we know from the research that is available.